Welcome to another video on discussing my research papers. So in this video I'm going to be discussing a paper that I published in IOP Nanotechnology in 2018 called Investigation into the Effects of Surface Stripping Zinc Oxide Nanosheets. So above me you'll find a link to my previous discussing my research video where I looked at a paper called the investigation into the effects of surface stripping zinc oxide nanorods with Argon bombardment, and this paper was almost a follow-up paper to this. So this paper I'm discussing today was published about 3 years after that, as I say in 2018, but it was effectively the same or similar set of experiments using Argon bombardment to remove the surface of, in this case, zinc oxide nanosheets, and look at what effect that had on the electrical characterization. So in this paper we grew some, or synthesized some zinc oxide nanosheets, which was done in a commercial microwave, and zinc acetate nanosheets were formed. We then drop cast those onto silicon, annealed them at 360 degrees, and at that temperature in air the zinc acetate converts into zinc oxide. So the difference between a nanosheet and a nanorod or nanowire, other than its shape, is the actual structure of them. So the nanorods that we synthesize are single crystal, while these ones are polycrystal, so they're made up of small crystals which then join together to form the nanosheet. So in a lot of the science I covered in that previous video, so please refer to that to actually go through the science of this paper, to go into more detail of the science. But effectively the takeaway from that paper was that the defects make their way to the surface of the crystal, and therefore if you remove the surface by Argon bombardment, you remove the defects. So the idea behind this research was, what happens with a polycrystalline structure? Are the defects still situated near the surface? So what we did is we took these nanosheets, we bombarded them with 3 different energies of argon. So we used 0.3 kV, 1 kV and 2 kV. The 0.3 kV represents the 2 microamp range that we used in the previous paper. So this is what we're going to refer to as a light argon bombardment, and the 1 kV as a sort of more powerful argon bombardment, and the 2 kV is a very powerful argon bombardment. And what we did in this set of experiments was actually look at the effects over time. So we bombarded the nanosheets for varying amounts of time as each power as well. We did the usual 2-point probe measurements, SEM measurements, and photoluminescence measurements. And for this paper we also did some XPS as well. So what did we see? First of all, with the 0.3 kV bombardment, which is the very light argon bombardment, we saw that we cleaned the surface, similar to what we saw with the nanorods. So the XPS showed that after argon bombardment of 0.3 kV, the amount of water on the surface dropped or reduced, and we took this as indication as removing the surface contamination. And like in the previous paper, this corresponded with a reduction in the measured resistance. We also saw that at this sort of power of argon bombardment there was no change in the photoluminescence, so that tied in well with the previous paper on nanorods. We saw again very similar results with the 1 kV measurements. So when we bombarded with this 1 kV argon, we saw that the surface of the nano sheet started getting damaged, and the resistance measurements started going up with time. So the longer we argon bombarded for, the higher the measured resistance. And again with the photoluminescence, the longer we argon bombarded for, the smaller the defect band became when measured, as I say, with PL. The 2 kV seemed to be just too powerful to actually do the experiment fully with, so even for a small amount of time you were getting significant damage to the sheets, and for long periods of time, we ended up with hardly any sample at all. So if you read through this paper, and there'll be links down in the description below, you'll see that we've got an incomplete data set for the 2 kV measurements. So what did these results tell us? Well, they told us that nanosheets act very similar to nanorods and our environment. You can clean them, and that improves the contact when doing nanoscale 2 probe measurements. Higher bombardment allowed us to reduce the defects, which increase the resistance, and we can do it for longer times, and again this would cause the defects to reduce more and the resistance to go higher, so we can almost control the resistance of the nanosheets with the Argon bombardment. What we also saw in this paper and the previous paper is that the IV curves moved from an almost linear shape to being more rectifying, and this again is because we're removing the defects, which add more electrons to the outside of the nanosheets, and when it comes into contact with a metal you get some upwards band bending, which causes the more rectifying nature of the IV curve. So this result is fairly useful for people who want to investigate using zinc oxide nanosheets as contacts or parts of solar cells or gas sensors. So zinc oxide is optically transparent, and therefore it can be used in solar cells as a conductive layer. They're also, because of their large surface area, very good in gas sensors, and in those applications you do want to tailor the conduction to your needs, and this is a method of doing this. Anyway, I hope you found this insightful, and if you like this video please subscribe and like, and I'll see you in another video soon.